All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you're just tuning in for November, we have a busy month in store. So for the first time ever, our theme this month is archaeology, paleontology, and geology. So if you check out the website, exploringbytheseat.com, you can find all the live lessons that we have coming up to register with your classrooms. But this week, we have a really special theme on the go. You may remember last year we connected with CNN for their Call to Earth Day. And this year we're doing it again, but we like to go a little bit bigger. We don't like a day, we wanted a whole week of live events with scientists, explorers, adventurers, and conservationists who are on the front lines of our changing planet. So if you don't know, CNN has an editorial series committed to reporting on the environmental challenges facing our planet together with the solutions. Their goal is to drive awareness and education around key sustainability issues and inspire positive action. So Call to Earth Day is actually going to be tomorrow. So there'll be a lot of programming on the channel and cool stories being shared. But like I said, we're going all week this week. We have a combination of some of the people who have been shared in the stories on CNN over the last year or two. We've also reached out to our community of scientists and explorers and conservationists to share some of their really cool stories as well. And I don't think this story gets much more cooler or much more significant for conservation, what we're going to talk about here today. So 12,000 years ago, direwolves ruled the Ice Age wilderness of North America until mysteriously vanishing forever. Now scientists at Colossal Biosciences have used ancient DNA and cutting-edge biotechnology to bring them back. Today, we're going to meet Matt James. He is Colossal's Chief Animal Officer, to discover how his team revived the direwolf and are now working to de-extinct other lost species like the woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo. So I'm going to reach backstage and see if we can grab Matt in here with us.
Hello.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, Matt. It's great to have you here joining us live today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.
All right, perfect. Well, Matt, we've got classrooms across Canada and the US joining us. There'll be even more who will tune into the recording as the week goes on. So a shout out to those classrooms. Don't be shy to use the chat bar. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Send us in some questions. A shout out to our camera classrooms waiting backstage. But Matt, let's let you take over for a bit. Let's share the story before we turn the students loose.
Sounds great. I'll share my screen here so you guys can see some exciting stuff that we're doing here at Colossal.
Perfect.
There we go. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. I love sharing the story of Colossal and what we do here at Colossal. I think, talking to kids your age is one of my favorite because I think nobody really gets or understands the mission of Colossal and the sort of the inspiration that Colossal creates like kids your age. So this is really exciting for me. So I am Matt James. I'm the Chief Animal Officer at Colossal, and that is not a job that you probably would hear very often. When I was your age, I could have never dreamt up having a job title like Chief Animal Officer. But I spent the last 20 years of my life working in and around animals and in and around this conservation space. So I've always been very passionate about wildlife, about nature, and finding ways that we can reduce the impact that humans have on nature. So early on in my childhood, I identified this passion. I started studying biology and chemistry. I went to college where I studied and got degrees in biology and chemistry before going to graduate school and studying ecology. Quickly after that, I began to apply all of those learnings in a really interesting way. Actually, I found a job working with dolphins where I was learning how to train dolphins, and so that we could study dolphins in human care. And more importantly, we could sort of share the story of dolphins and why it's important to conserve our oceans and our species. That eventually led to me working at zoos here in the US. So I was a zookeeper working with elephants in Tampa. I was the general curator, which is sort of like the job that oversees all the animal care and research that happens at the zoo in Miami, Zoo Miami, which was an amazing job. And then I eventually worked my way up to being the senior director of a zoo here in Dallas, which is where I live now, Dallas, Texas. And about 4 years ago, as I was working at the Dallas Zoo, I got a call from my new boss, Ben Lamb, who started Colossal Biosciences just a couple months prior. And he was looking for somebody that was passionate about animals, animal care, animal welfare, wildlife conservation, and had a background that could help with this new idea that he had. He wanted to use technology like genomic engineering, so the ability to go into an animal's DNA and change the DNA sequence to bring species back from extinction. And I thought, well, this is just one of the wildest things I've ever heard. I have to be a part of it. So I joined Colossal 4 years ago, and now I am the chief animal officer, where I oversee all the animal care, animal management, and welfare of the animals we study today and the animals that we're bringing back from extinction tomorrow. I'm also the executive director of the Colossal Foundation, which is our nonprofit conservation foundation, where we take all the technologies that it takes to make a direwolf, a woolly mammoth, a dodo, and we apply those to species on the brink of extinction today. So you see I'm working in that one picture, I'm working at an elephant orphanage in Botswana, where elephants who have lost their mothers and would otherwise not survive in the wild are brought into human care, where we can rehabilitate them and put them back in the wild. It's amazing work. So we get to support amazing conservation like that while we get to study animals and understand more and more about elephants and woolly mammoths and other species like that. So about almost a year ago, I guess 6 months ago, we announced to the world a really famous thing, and hopefully you heard of it. And that's that picture on the left. That's me holding the world's first direwolf in 12,500 years. So 12,000 years ago, direwolves roamed North America. And they were these larger than life wolves, 140 pounds, much bigger than the wolves that we have today. And they went extinct, unfortunately, because as humans came into North America, we became competitive and started competing with for the prey that they needed. So we lost the direwolf 12,500 years ago, and I'll explain to you here in a second how we brought them back. But first, I think it's really important that everybody gets to hear this. So that's the first direwolf howl that anybody's heard in 12,500 years. It's pretty incredible. And so this video here is me hanging out with the direwolves. And at this time, we were bottle feeding them. They were still very young babies. These guys were about 4 weeks old. 4 weeks old at this point. And so we were sort of like their moms, and we were helping give them all the nutrition and care that they needed to survive. So really amazing opportunity. One of the coolest things that I've ever done in my life. Now, hopefully you're asking yourself, how do you bring a species back from extinction? How did you make a direwolf? If the species went extinct, how can you bring it back? So I've got this next video, which is being presented by our chief scientist, which is another really cool job title, Beth Shapiro, and she'll help explain to us how we bring species back from extinction.
Essentially, there are 7 steps to making a direwolf. The first step is to find actual direwolf fossils. We go out into the field, into museums, and we find remains that look like they're going to be really well preserved. Second, we have to generate this genome sequence from a direwolf. So we use the fossils that we found, we grind them up, and we extract preserved DNA. That DNA is not going to be in great condition, but we can still get all of the information that we need, even if the tiny little DNA fragments are broken and damaged and really small. The third step, then, is to identify what it is that made a direwolf like a direwolf and not like a gray wolf. To do this, we line the direwolf genome up against the gray wolf genome on a computer, and we scan them, looking for where they're different from each other. This is how we identify the core genes. What is it in that DNA code that makes a direwolf a direwolf? Once we've identified the genes that we want to change, it's time to design the tools that we're going to use to actually make those edits in living cells. This is part of the genome engineering process. After we've done that, we move on to step 5, which is actually using those tools to make the edits. This is where we're working with cells in a dish in a lab, and we are actually going into the genomes of those cells and cutting out the gray wolf versions of the genes and pasting in their place the direwolf versions of those genes. After we have those edited cells, it's time to turn that into a living animal. So step 6, embryo transfer. This is where we take these cells and we take another cell that has had its nucleus removed, so it doesn't have any of its own DNA, and we inject in its place our edited genome sequence. And then we're on to the final step. Transfer those edited embryos into a surrogate maternal host who's going to eventually give birth to our direwolf.
So very cool stuff, right? I think this is amazing technology, and this shows what is possible today, right? We have this amazing obligation to restore the nature that we destroy. And these technologies are being used in really interesting ways to bring back things like direwolves, but also many other species, which we'll talk about. But one of the coolest parts about my job, and I think this is so cool for your theme with paleontology, is we get to use all this ancient history and we can get to go dig in the dirt and find DNA in order to bring these species back. That's amazing work that Beth's team does. What my team is really focused on is once we have these furry little guys you see right in front of you here, my team has to figure out how do you take care of a species that hasn't been around in 12,000 years, right? How do we take care of these animals? So we have amazing teams of animal care experts that write policies and guidelines and books on how you take care of these species using the best science that we have available today. And I'm really happy to tell you that the direwolves are doing amazing. The two you see in front of you here, that's Romulus and Remus, the first 2 direwolves ever born. They're brothers. They're actually identical clones of each other. And here I've got some update videos for you to see. So this is when the direwolves were about 3 months old. So this is going back last January. The direwolves were 3 months old. They're really sort of sorting out their, what they are, what they're doing. They're really exploring the environment for the first time. This was the first snow that they had ever seen. So we were really excited to get out and show them the snow and let them play around. And as you might imagine, they loved it. They look like Arctic animals, but they're actually from pretty warm areas back in the Pleistocene. So they can tolerate the cold, but they really kind of like normal, middle of the road type of weather. Then they continue to grow up, and now they're about 5 months old here. And what we're seeing now is that they're not just sort of independently developing; they're starting to develop socially together. This is where we get to see what we call ranking, where the direwolves begin to sort of feel each other out and they understand who is number 1, who's the boss, and who's number 2. And so what's funny is even though they are clones of each other, Romulus is bigger than his brother Remus. But despite Romulus being bigger than Remus, Remus is the boss. So you see them feeding here. Since Remus is the boss, that means he gets to eat first, and he pushes Romulus off. But he's also considerate enough that he leaves some food for his brother. So it's been really amazing watching them kind of develop together. And then finally, what's not in this video is they had a sister born a couple months after they were born, Khaleesi. So she is a really amazing animal. She's the first female direwolf born. She's also a little smaller than these guys are. And so she's a little more timid, right? She's afraid of these big, tough boys. But now that she's getting older and she's getting her confidence, she's starting to tell these boys who's boss. And now even though she's not number 1, she's not the alpha wolf here, she definitely has her voice heard. So now fast forward to today, this past October, just last month, almost exactly a month ago, the boys turned 1 on October 1st. So we threw them a little birthday party. We made them this little birthday cake here, which is actually full of a lot of fun things like meats and blood. And it's not actually a cake. It's really made for a carnivore like a wolf.
It's just 1 year your life, singing this song, forever live on, strength and the will to survive.
So as you can tell, we have a lot of fun with the direwolves. There's really important work that happened to create these direwolves, but we also want them to have this really great, fulfilling life and existence, right? So we focus a lot on ensuring the animal care and welfare of those two direwolves. And then they get to have great parties for their birthday. And they're kind of maybe the most famous wolves in the world. So we always want to share with the public and take these really fun videos so that they can see them. I think one of the things that we also announced when we told the world that we brought direwolves back from extinction that was a little lost was maybe this idea that we also cloned the world's first red wolf clone. So red wolves are critically endangered species, and they can only be found in the United States, but they're also the most endangered wolf in the world. So historically, they came from the southeast of the United States. So everywhere from, maybe all the way up to New York at one point, through down to Florida and across into Texas. They had a really wide range, but back in the 1960s, they almost went extinct. And that was because people were shooting them because they thought that they would harm their livestock, their cattle, their farm animals. Fortunately, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that works for the government, they had the great foresight to say, before this species goes extinct, we should bring them into human care. We should bring them into human care and make sure this species doesn't go extinct. And now these wolves persist under the care of humans on these large sanctuaries. But unfortunately, by that time, there were only about 14 wolves left. So those 14 wolves were taken into human care, and that means that there's not a lot of genetic diversity. So what we did is we went and found animals that have these red wolf genes that still exist out there, but they would be called hybrids. So there's sort of red wolf and half coyote. But we're able to take the red wolf genes and make more red wolves using the cloning technology, the same technology that made the direwolves. So we did just that, and we made this gorgeous animal here. This is Nekaketa. She's the world's first cloned red wolf. She's being used as a genetic rescue project. So that means we can use her genes because they're unique to the population of red wolves in a way that makes the entire population more healthy. So we didn't just actually make Nekaketa, who you see here, but we also made 3 boys. Those are Blaze, Cinder, and Ash. Those 4 animals are going to be critical to saving the world's most endangered wolf population. This is incredible work. This couldn't happen without de-extinction. So a lot of times when I'm talking to people say, why is it that you focus on species that have gone extinct already? Why not protect species today? And I'm really happy to tell you that's exactly what we do. We use the tools of de-extinction to protect species today while also reversing extinctions of yesterday. So that's a really important component. De-extinction becomes this idea that it can create technology and tools that allow us to protect species today while we restore species that have been lost so that we can put them back into the wild to make ecosystems more healthy. What's really incredible about this is we also are able to do other types of work, not just genetic work. So because we have so many smart people that work here at Colossal and the Colossal Foundation, we have this amazing group of people that work on artificial intelligence. And what artificial intelligence allows us to do is to study things called bioacoustics. So this is an idea that we can record animal sounds in the wild. We can have the AI look at the sounds that they're making and begin to tell us specific patterns. So in this case, we're working in Yellowstone National Park, and we're studying the howls and the communication of gray wolves in Yellowstone National Park. And this is really cool because it allows us to sort of unlock the language that wolves use to communicate to each other. So we can both use bioacoustics to identify which wolf is making the howl and where that wolf is in the park, but also what is that wolf saying to the other wolves? That's a really great tool when we start to talk about how do you manage these animals in Yellowstone National Park. But it's also really good because it helps people understand that wolves are empathetic, emotionally complex animals. These are not mindless hunters. They're not to be feared. They should be revered. We should love wolves. They do an amazing thing to the ecosystem that helps make every aspect of Yellowstone National Park and wherever they live healthier. But a lot of people are afraid of them. So if we can help show that wolves have these languages, that they have words and they have emotions, then we can help protect wolves and make sure people don't harm wolves. What's really cool, and one of the favorite parts about my job, is that we're not just focused on one species or just wolves. We actually work across more than 45 different species that are endangered today. So the Colossal Foundation helps protect species that are threatened with extinction, which it turns out there's more than 1 million species in the world that are threatened with extinction. So we work with species like the tooth-billed pigeon, which is a bird that comes from a small island in the Pacific called Samoa. We thought it went extinct 13 years ago. Nobody had seen it in 13 years. And using artificial intelligence and bioacoustics, we were able to identify that the tooth-billed pigeon was still in Samoa. And now, just this week, we actually saw the first tooth-billed pigeon in 13 years. Pretty incredible. We also work with amazing species like the northern white rhino. If you heard about the northern white rhino, you would know that there's only 2 animals left in their entire species. It's a mother and daughter pair that live in Kenya. And so they can't make babies. So the population is what we call functionally extinct. But the magic of de-extinction, the technology of de-extinction, allows us to make more northern white rhinos so we can help restore the population. And then we can do the same thing we're doing with red wolves by bringing new genetics into their population to help refresh the entire population so that they can recover. So these are all the tools of de-extinction that we apply across many species that you see here, plus more. And this is one of the reasons that we say our company's mission, Colossal Biosciences and the Colossal Foundation, is to make extinction a thing of the past. Right? So we are both reversing extinction while preventing future extinction. Excellent. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, Matt, thanks for that great presentation. It is really exciting to see the direwolves. We've shared stories. We've connected with Beth to share stories about woolly mice and new breakthroughs on the path to the dodo. I know Tasmanian tiger work is being done. It's a very exciting time right now.
It's amazing. I mean, I think what technology allows us to do and how we can be better stewards of nature by using modern technology is really amazing. And I can't think of anything I'd rather do with my life. So I'm one of the most lucky people in the world because I get to do this every day.
All right. Well, Matt, before we get into Q&A action, while you were presenting, I pulled a little Kahoot quiz together behind the scenes. So we're going to interact. We'll let the students test some of their knowledge, see how well they're paying attention, and then we'll go into Q&A action. So if you are tuning in on YouTube, you can start to put questions into the chat. But let me share my screen here so we can get this Kahoot going. All right, should be coming up on your screens now. If you want to join us today, you need to go to kahoot.it. Kahoot.it, it's going to ask you for a password or a PIN number. Today's PIN is 4116. So kahoot.it, 4116. Now, maybe you've got a Chromebook, maybe you've got a tablet, you can join that way. If you don't worry about it. This should already be up at the front of your classroom right now. So you can shout out your answers to your teacher and see how well you do. If you're tuning in from home, that QR code can be scanned with a tablet, with a phone, and it will bring you right in. So while we wait for a few groups to come in here and join us, Matt, I've got a question here in the chat wondering, working in this field, what is the one thing that's maybe surprised you the most that maybe you didn't anticipate?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, we work in a really complex, difficult field of science, so we get stumped every single day. But for me, I think one of the things I didn't expect was maybe how excited public and maybe, and especially kids your age, would be about this work. So we get a lot of people reaching out. My email is full of people reaching out saying, how can I get involved? So one of the most exciting things that I didn't see coming when I joined Colossal is that Colossal not only works in the conservation space to prevent extinction, but I think it also inspires people to get involved in conservation, which is really cool.
All right. Definitely very, very cool. We'll give it another few seconds here. So, Matt, one more question here before we start the Kahoot, and that is about the direwolf. So how did you feel the first time that you saw, held, heard them?
So the first time I saw them was when they were born, right? So all of a sudden you saw this flash of white, this little white puppy came out. And it was both this sense of relief because we had been working on this project for a long time and you want to make sure everything goes really well. But it was immediately followed with a sense of responsibility and dread and anxiety and all the things you might imagine, because suddenly the first species to ever be brought back from extinction was in my hands and my responsibility to make sure that it survives and thrives and has the most amazing life. So it was excitement followed by dread and responsibility and a big mix of emotions. It was incredible. I mean, I still get goosebumps thinking about it today.
All right. Very exciting. Well, I think we've got a crew of classrooms here hanging out and ready to go. A few more trickling in, but I think we should get this started because we want to get into some Q&A action. I want to see some faces, hear some voices. So let's play a little bit of Kahoot. So there is some true and false. There's some multiple choice. The faster you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. And then we'll see what our podium looks like. Which classroom is going to have the bragging rights today? So first question, direwolves last roamed North America. Was it 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, or as far back as 20,000 years ago? So when was the last time direwolves roamed North America? 2,000, 5,000, 12,000, or 20,000 years ago? You have about 10 seconds to lock in your answer, and then we will go from there. All right. Good job, crew. Overwhelmingly, we went with 12,000 years ago. Let's take a look at our leaderboard. That puts the glowing orca into that top spot. We've got a true or false coming your way. The first step to bring back the direwolf, finding fossils. What do you think? First step to bring back the direwolf, true or false? Finding fossils. Shorter time to get a true or false in. You have 10 seconds left, and then we'll check in. All right. Good job, crew. Absolutely what Beth said. First step, we need those fossils. We need to find some material. So lots of movement on the board, but the glowing orca is holding the lead by 3 points. So it's close. You got to get it in fast. This technology will be very important for present day conservation as well. What do you think? This conservation or this technology, is it going to be important for present day conservation? True or false? What do you think? Matt, while we wait a few more seconds for this answer, I think this might be easy for you to answer. I've got a question in the chat. Dinosaurs. Are you guys thinking about dinosaurs?
Well, I mean, I think about dinosaurs every day. They're one of the coolest animals to ever really exist. But we're really focused on species we can put back in the wild today.
All right. I kind of thought that's what the answer was going to be. So yes, absolutely true. This technology is going to be so important for the conservation work we're doing now to try and preserve the species that we have here. And we've got one more question to go. Speaking of those species, about how many of them are threatened with extinction right now? 3,000, 75,000, 250,000, or is it as high as 1 million species threatened with extinction? If you visit our YouTube page, you can see we've done several events with Olpejita Conservancy with Najin and Fatu, the last two northern white rhinos. We've got to meet some of their rangers and keepers. So it's a really cool story to hear about the work that they're doing. And yes, over 1 million species are threatened with extinction. So you can see why technology like this is going to be so important. Let's take a look at our podium. In third place, the yellow kiwi. In second place, we've got, the glowing orca bumped off at the end. Who is going to be in that top spot? The silver dugong. All right, crew, thanks so much for playing along with us. I'm going to stop that screen share. I'm going to turn off that music, and we are going to Q&A action. So keep those questions coming into the chat. Let's go backstage. Let's find Jefferson Middle School. Graders of how are we doing? All right, looks like a big class. Is this two classes stuck together, or is this just one?
This is two classes from Jefferson Middle School. We're really excited to be here. Into direwolves a lot.
Very cool. Well, let's get some questions.
Go ahead. Come on. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anjal, and my question is, why exactly do scientists want to bring direwolves back? For example, do bringing them back impact the environment or has a crucial job for the environment?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of reasons we want to bring them back. One big reason is that first we can learn a lot about de-extinction and all the technologies needed to bring all species back by doing this work. But direwolves also played an important role in the Pleistocene ecosystem. So 12,000 years ago and beyond, direwolves were really critical to controlling prey populations. So as we create other Pleistocene era species like woolly mammoths, it's really important that you have a balance of predators and prey in an ecosystem. So the direwolves represent an amazing ecosystem role as a predator to help control populations and keep ecosystem balance.
Thank you.
All right, sixth graders, you got another one kicking around there for us?
My question is, how long did it take to make direwolves?
So we've been working on direwolves for about 18 months. So it was actually, in terms of the way de-extinction works, that's really fast. So from the time we launched the project to the time they were born was about 18 months. Now, part of that is a lot of the work that happens in the lab. But then once we had the embryos made, the embryos were gestated. So mom was pregnant with the embryos for 63 days. So that was 63 days of me pacing back and forth, waiting for this to happen and making sure that all the animals were healthy.
All right, Jefferson Middle, hold those questions. We're going to come back your way shortly. Excuse me, Bayside Public School. I'm going to bring you in front and center. How are we doing, Bayside?
I don't know how to. How were dire wolves made before humans?
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
How were dire wolves made in the first place?
Oh, so direwolves evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago. So they actually had a common ancestor with a lot of animals like that we know today, like the gray wolf, and also there's a dog-like species that comes from Africa called the jackal. So over millions of years, animals sort of evolve and they become individual species. So the direwolves were evolved from a wolf-like animal that existed about 2 million years ago.
All right, looks like we might have another question there.
No. Yeah, me.
I promise we'll visit a couple times, so we'll definitely get a few questions in.
Why are direwolves so cute, but they're really dangerous?
Yeah, I mean there is a real challenge here because they're so cute that you want to get close to them, but they are wild animals, and wild animals are inherently dangerous, right? So much like gray wolves or even other animals like bears, they're very cute because they're fluffy and they have big beautiful eyes and all those things. But we have to respect their distance because they are dangerous.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to come back your way shortly, Bayside, I promise. I imagine that was hard, Matt. It's probably at the stage now. They're getting pretty big that you guys have to kind of keep your distance and let them do direwolf things.
I mean, like any good parent, you're really invested and involved in the beginning, right? You saw the pictures of me bottle feeding them and holding them when they were puppies. But now that they're big, 120-pound plus adults, they deserve their own space. So we keep our distance.
All right, Mrs. Delpino's Fab Fives and Super Sixes. How are we doing today? Uh-oh, doesn't sound like the microphone's cooperating. I'm getting a lot of static. That's okay. Mrs. Delpino, do you want to type your questions in the private chat? And then I'll bring you guys back. So we can see you on screen while Matt answers some of those questions. While I wait for a few of those to come in, I've got a couple more questions here in the YouTube chat, Matt. We've got some high schoolers hanging out with us. What skills would you recommend, or maybe subjects they focus on if they want to maybe be in a career, something like Colossal or conservation, looking more at the genetic side of things?
Yeah, I think, what's really neat about Colossal, there's so many different disciplines represented here. So there's opportunities for a lot of different interests. If you're really interested in, say, working in the lab and on the genetics side, it's going to be important to take things like biology. As you get into high school levels, then you really want to push that even further. They teach like intro to genetics courses. And in college, I studied things like molecular biology and genetics, and then you get into more advanced fields. But on the other side of it, what I sort of focus more on is ecology. So how do animals interact with each other and with nature out in space? So if you're interested in being not in the lab, but in the field, then you can take more of an ecology standpoint, and you still use tools like genetics, but they're applied in a more ecological fashion. So I did a lot of work on like wetland science and ecology and things like botany and anatomy and physiology. So that sort of track.
Okay, and their follow-up was, are there any internship opportunities at Colossal?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the most exciting things, if you go to colossal.com careers page, we have summer internships. We typically offer them to undergraduate students, so like college level students. On occasion, there are opportunities for high school age kids as well, but typically it's sort of college age internships. They do everything from they work. I've got a few interns on our conservation team. We have folks that intern on the marketing team. We have folks that intern with the operations team. So there's a lot of opportunity.
All right, very cool. Okay, let me bring in Miss Dalpino's crew again so we can see them. Their question that they sent into the chat is about ecosystem balance. If the direwolves were to be released again, what impact do you think they might have in the ecosystem?
Well, like any predator that you expect to see them come in and predate or prey on animals in the ecosystem. If you remember I was talking about Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is very famous because in 1995, there were no wolves in Yellowstone anymore. They'd all been killed, unfortunately. And wolves were brought from Canada and reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park. And we saw a tremendous change in the ecosystem. There were too many elk in Yellowstone National Park. They were overgrazing and they were eating things like willow trees that sat on the banks of the rivers. When the wolves came in, they balanced out the prey population. So there were fewer elk. There was less grazing that happened. So the grasses and the bushes and the trees thrived a little more. And specifically, it allowed willows to grow, which literally changed the course of the river through Yellowstone National Park. And beavers came back. So it was really neat. You would expect that if you put a predator into an ecosystem, you might see a reduction of biodiversity or life, right? But it actually helps enhance it because it creates the right balance within the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to look at how that happens on its own in the ecosystem, where you might see the prey species go up, followed shortly by the predators. The prey falls, the predators fall kind of in behind. So it's really cool the way you see how ecosystems can balance themselves. Okay, let's go back to a few camera classrooms, and then maybe we'll squeeze in another YouTube question or two. Jefferson Middle School, I have a feeling you might have a question or two.
So my question is, how many tries did it take to successfully clone the direwolves?
That's a great question. So, obviously science is full of trial and error. Every step along the way, we would have successes and we'd have some errors. So that's, from the genetic sequencing to the genetic engineering and even creating the embryos. But once we had the embryos, we actually tried 4 times and we got 3 animals. So we were doing really well there.
Thank you.
All right, you got another one there?
I do.
All right.
Why did you pick the direwolf to bring back than all the other animals?
So all the species that we look at Colossal is sort of this point where we say what function or what service could they provide back to nature. At the same time, we have to look at what DNA is available, what fossils exist where we can get DNA, and then what is the science required to bring that animal back. So all 3 of those sort of work together to tell us which species we have the opportunity to bring back and which ones we should bring back. And then depending on how challenging the science is why one species might come before the other. So direwolf was able to come back in 18 months. But we've been working on woolly mammoths for 4 years, and we're not close yet. So, each species sort of has its own challenges.
All right. Thanks, Jefferson Middle School. Those are some great questions. Bayside Public School, I'm going to check in and see if you have a couple more questions. I know there were. So let's grab a couple.
Do direwolves grow fast?
They grow so fast. It's sad, but also really good for the direwolves, but sad for me. So the direwolves were born October 1st of last year. So they're just about 13 months old now. And they went from being born at right around 1 pound to now more than 120 pounds. So you imagine how fast you guys grow. They're growing much, much faster, right? In 1 year, they gained 120 pounds.
Wow. All right. Do we have one more there at Bayside?
We're so bad.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm going to check in. If you guys do have another question, wave at the camera, and that'll be send someone up front, and I'll see you backstage. Miss Delpino's crew back here are Fab 5s and 6s, Super 6s. They're wondering, what are kind of future plans now? Like, are there going to be more direwolves? Do you have a plan to do a certain number a year? They're wondering what you're thinking.
So we're really focused on studying the direwolves we have today, because it's really important information that helps tell us how we're going to do everything else in the future with every other species. So we're going to continue working with these direwolves. They live in this incredible 2,000-acre preserve. So they're doing really well. And we want to study what impacts they have on that 2,000 acres that they live on. We also want to understand the behavior and the physiology and the health of all these animals that have gone through a very unique process. First animals to ever be genetically engineered to come back from extinction. So we're going to focus on what we have today, and then we'll make decisions in the coming years.
All right. Well, backstage, I see frantic waving from Bayside Public School. So we need to check in for one more question. Nice and loud. We're ready for you.
Okay, get in there. Who's doing it? I don't know. Anastasia wanted to. How did direwolves come after us?
What do you mean?
Are you wondering maybe how we lost them, how they went extinct?
Oh yeah, how they went extinct. So when direwolves were lost 12,000 years ago, it was because a few things happened. The climate was changing, right? We used to be much colder in an ice age. The climate was changing, which was changing the available animals for them to prey on, right? Their food was changing. At the same time, humans came and started challenging them for that food as well. So we actually outcompeted direwolves. While gray wolves, the wolves we have today, were also entering the landscape. So there was all this competition while their food was changing, the climate was changing. There's a lot of things happening at once, and they just went extinct, unfortunately. It can be a natural process, but a lot of extinction that you see today, and even going back 12,000 years ago, was driven by humans.
All right. Matt, I'm going to visit Jefferson one more time. They've asked if we can stop in before we wrap. But I got a really interesting question in the chat here. And that is plants. Are you guys thinking about plants at all, or any other organizations?
Absolutely. We're very focused on animal conservation at the moment, but all the tools that we have could be applied to plants. We've had a lot of chats about that. I think you will see more to come with us or a related organization working in plants, because without plants, you can't have animals. Without plants or animals, you can't have ecosystem. So we want to look at this very holistically and work with as many species and taxa as possible.
Okay. Jefferson Middle, I promised you could come back in. So let's wrap up with you guys.
Okay, so I was wondering, are there key differences in mixing DNA with sea, land, and air animals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where we see the most significant differences in terms of sort of de-extinction science is the differences between, rather sea, land, and air. It's more like mammals versus birds versus amphibians or reptiles, right? Each of these animals has very specific anatomy, physiology, and biology that changes the way that we can use de-extinction science. So for example, cloning. I've talked about cloning the red wolf. That can only right now be done in mammals because of the way our reproduction as a mammal works. You can't use that technology in birds because they're and then in amphibians, it's a whole nother game. And then if plants or corals or all these other species, it's unique to them. So every time we start a project, we have to identify those unique challenges, develop brand new science to overcome the challenges. And then what's great is we get to share that with the world.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
We have one more.
Yeah, if you want to squeeze in that last one, go ahead.
Thank you.
What do direwolves eat since their original habitat changed?
Good question. So what's really fortunate for us in terms of working with direwolves is that a lot of the animals that they would have eaten 12,000 years ago still exist today, or very similar species. So our direwolves, they eat things like deer, they eat beef, sometimes they even get things like horse meat. So they get a whole variety of diet, which wouldn't be too dissimilar than what they saw 12,000 years ago. There were still bison, much like beef. There were still deer and elk available. So they have very similar diets today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, gang. Matt, before we let you go today, there's one more question that's come up numerous times in the YouTube chat. And I'm sure it's something that you're thinking about a lot at Colossal. With things starting to happen, the direwolves, hopefully soon, Tasmanian tigers, and the dodo, there must be thought about how to reintroduce to the wild. So is that something you're thinking about now, thinking about plans, talking to governments? What do you think that's going to look like, that next phase?
Yeah. So we work every day in this space. One of the most fun parts of my job outside of taking care of the animals is getting to plan for reintroduction or rewilding of these animals. In order to do that, though, we have to go into find the habitats where these animals will succeed, which sometimes means removing things that drove them to extinction in the first place. So a dodo, for example, in Mauritius, dodos went extinct more than 400 years ago because people introduced cats and rats and monkeys to the island. Those animals don't belong in Mauritius, so they need to be removed from the island before we can put dodos back. So we do a lot of that work now, today. We work with governments, we work with nonprofit conservation leaders in order to begin to restore habitats so that when the species is brought back from extinction, there's a place for it to go.
All right. Well, there's lots of moving pieces. There's lots of work to be done, but you guys, it's so exciting to catch all the new news stories, the latest breakthroughs. We just interviewed Beth. If classrooms want to go online to our daily dive, she talked about a breakthrough in being able to get one step closer to the dodo with the eggs. So it is very exciting times at Colossal. I want to give a shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us, our backstage classrooms, our YouTube classrooms. Thank you for playing Kahoot and the great questions. A couple classrooms ducked out, but I want to bring who we still have backstage. If you guys want to give a big wave, a big sign, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure to host you today, and I hope we can do some more in the future and get classrooms caught up and following along with Colossal.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you all.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you in events later this week. But for now, we're going to sign out. Thanks, everyone. All right. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.